Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to talk about Daryl Dixon, and I wanted to talk about how he ends up in France, because obviously that's a big question that a lot of us fans have, and Daryl Dixon is premiering this week, so I figured that we might as well discuss some of this stuff and get into some theories here. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my reviews for Daryl Dixon. Episode 1 will be premiering in 3 days. If you do watch on AMC Plus, or if you're watching on cable, it's premiering this Sunday. Early reviews also do come out tomorrow, so I will be posting my breakdown on like everything that people are saying and what the general vibe is going into this show. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that. But the question I have for you guys is, and you guys can let me know down below in the comments, could Jadis be responsible for Daryl being in France? And the reason why this is a very interesting idea is specifically because of Jadis's connections to the CRM and a lot of what we saw in the World Beyond post-credit scene, and specifically this scene right here that we saw in the Comic-Con trailer for Daryl Dixon, which features Daryl running away from this advanced walker that is running towards him. We see these train cars, or I guess storage containers, in the back, and it seems like he's on a boat of some kind. That's kind of what it seems like. He's on this massive ship of some kind, and what could they be delivering? Well, we'll talk about that in here, but I do think a lot of this is connected to the Civic Republic, and specifically that World Beyond post-credit scene. So to rewind a little bit, the last that we did see of Daryl, he was looking for Rick. And at the end of The Walking Dead, he did find out, well, I guess they jumped forward about a year, but he did find out that Rick Grimes was alive, and he went out to go and search for him. And that was sort of, I think, the best way you could have ended that character's story. And it definitely set up the spinoff in a really great way. And if you've watched the opening minutes of Daryl Dixon, because they are available to watch right now if you do have AMC Plus, you would have noticed that it doesn't really necessarily start off with him searching for Rick. He's just in France already. He wakes up just sort of on the shore of France and encounters some burners, which are like burning walkers or acid walkers kind of thing. And yeah, I've talked about that in videos before, but we got no mention as to how Daryl actually ended up in France at all. Like, we got no mention of anything. Daryl seems to be a little shocked as to how he ended up there, though he doesn't seem that surprised that he's sort of in this region in general, which means that this scene here, when he's on this boat, it seems like, where they're working on stuff, or maybe they're delivering certain things or supplies or whatever, it's a little more interesting, right? Like, why was Daryl on this boat here? So the reason why Jadis could be connected to this here is because a lot of what happens in that World Beyond post-credit scene, there's a lot of ties there, obviously, or they hint at ties between scientists that are studying variants in America and in France. And there seems to be this CRM connection because of, I mean, again, first of all, you're showing this scene at the end of World Beyond, and that show focused entirely on the CRM. And there seems to be an overall connection in terms of at least the military side of things and some of the old world, right? And so the idea here is that that's probably what was happening here, is that there was this ship here, and Daryl happened to be on this ship. Somehow he found out clues. Because again, that is one of those things with Daryl that I hope that they do address. You know, he was out there for who knows how long, a year, 2 years, or however long it would end up being. I hope that he actually did find some sort of proof as to where Rick was. Like, I hope it wasn't just nothing. Like, he was just out there looking around and literally found nothing. I hope he actually found some sort of clues, at least, like, you know, his whereabouts, or just something. Like, he got some type of hint that he is actually here. There is something, like, maybe he doesn't necessarily know of the CRM, but maybe he learned of something like that. Like, there's something bigger here, right? And that could be why he was on this boat, right? Like, he ends up in a specific location and somehow ends up on this boat. And it's possible that he was there because he was trying to find some clues on just anything in terms of Rick Grimes. Like, I could see it, you know, from his perspective being like if Rick couldn't be here, maybe Rick went somewhere else, and so he ended up sort of being on this boat because he's trying to find some sort of connection in some way to Rick, right? Maybe he's forced there, but there does seem to be, I believe, a connection here with the Civic Republic and why there is this massive boat, you know, go like literally in the middle of the ocean. Because that's the thing too, like, a lot of that makes no sense, right? Like, you got to think of the Civic Republic in its entirety in terms of the resources they do have and just the state of the world right now. There's not going to be a lot of people traveling via this like like massive ship or whatever from America to France, or I guess to Europe, there's not going to be a lot of people who are doing that. So there's only really one organization that we know, and that is the Civic Republic, right? They have 200,000 people. I doubt there's anything bigger than that in the United States or like Canada, or maybe there's something else bigger in Canada or about the same size. But the Civic Republic seems to be like this really massive force. Like it seems to be like one of the only things right now anyways, unless we're made aware of something else, again, like maybe something in Canada or something like that. But I do believe that there is like a traveling back and forth, and there could be variant walkers here in these storage containers, because we do see Daryl running away from a variant walker, and it's clearly a variant walker because it can't be a person. The way it runs, just the way its body is moving, it looks like a walker, but it's running, and it's running at Daryl, and Daryl is sort of forced to leave because there's like this big explosion. So I really think, and again, this is sort of a theory, but I think it makes a lot of sense that Daryl ended up finding some clues on Rick and gets very, very close anyways to finding out about the Civic Republic. He ends up on this boat, and this boat likely has a connection to the variant walkers. They could be delivering them. They could be doing tests and stuff on them, because obviously we saw in the World Beyond post-credit scene that is what they're doing. And we also did see in the Daryl Dixon trailer that there does seem to be a new variant of walker that almost seems to be used as a weapon. And I think something happens here on this ship where basically this explosion sort of happens, things go wrong, and then Daryl ends up jumping off the boat and then ends up somehow in France. Now, how does Jadis play into this? Well, I think the reason why the ship exploded could be because of Jadis. There could have been an accident, something could have happened, it could be just as simple as that, but it's possible as well that Daryl was just getting too close to finding Rick, and Jadis was made aware of this, and so she caused an explosion because she knew Daryl would be on that ship, and so that was sort of her way in, I guess, getting rid of Daryl, and that's how Daryl eventually ends up in France. Now, I think the Jadis part to it seems somewhat like a stretch in the sense that, you do have to sort of think of Jadis's motives overall, right? I think it's easy to say that I do think she, overall wants to stay with the Civic Republic, and she will do anything that she can to be in the CRM. Like, she will do anything for Major General Beale, right? Like, she wants power. She really is only, like, she only thinks about herself, really. If there was another organization or military, entity out there that could give her more power, she would jump ship and join that, right? Like, we've seen that with her before. She was going back and forth between Rick and Negan. I think she would do the same thing in this situation here, but that's the thing. The CRM, they are what they are, and I don't think she's necessarily going to betray them in any way. So I do think, in a sense, for her, obviously, like, that's the thing. This show, like the Ones Who Live, they will really establish why Rick is so important, because it's not like he's like this random person, right? Like, that's the thing. It's not like he's just this random person that they found. For some reason, he is so valuable to the CRM. And I think Jadis, that's why she rose in power so fast. And there's going to be some stuff there. There's going to be issues if people that Rick knows gets very close and, tries to save him or this and that. And I think if Daryl gets close, Jadis is going to get involved. If Michonne gets close, Jadis is going to get involved. And I think that's where you could make the connection here, that is why, or it's possible anyways, that, Jadis was responsible for the explosion on that ship, and that's why Daryl ended up abandoning ship and then wakes up in France, right? I think that makes a little bit more sense, because I do think the franchise needs to make a little bit more of an effort to make connections here, right? Like, they do have to establish a little bit more between what Daryl and them are doing, what Maggie and Negan and them are doing, and the Civic Republic. Like, they can't keep it so separate for too much longer. Like, you don't have to completely just like make the CRM, the story on all three shows. Eventually, I do think there's going to be some connections there, and it will play a role a lot more in later seasons, but I think you got to slowly start to hint at things right now. I really do. Leave little clues here and there, and obviously you want to focus on some other stuff, but I think you should start to get into some of that here. So I think if Jadis was responsible for this, first of all, we're not going to see her on the show. It's going to be something that I feel like we would learn on the show The Ones Who Live. Like, I think there would be a scene where Jadis just, I don't know, like there was some connection to Daryl or something, and then we learned through information that that's what Jadis did, kind of thing, right? I feel like on Daryl Dixon, the only thing that we would learn in terms of that was that the CRM was involved. Like, I think Daryl if there was a scene, say in episode 3 or 4 of this show, where he's discussing sort of, you know, how he got here kind of thing. Maybe he says, I was on this ship because I was following, you know, clues as to like where my friend could be. And this ship seemed to be connected in some way. And so I ended up on this ship, and then obviously things went wrong. And maybe there was something suspicious that happened there, right? Like I could see that being a really excellent way in explaining everything here and making some really good connections here. Because is the show going to be about the Pacific Republic? No, it's obviously going to focus on another group, but this group could have connections and ties, right? Because you do have to somewhat like connect everything here. And I think this is what you could do for season 1. And I think it could make sense as to how Carol eventually finds out where Daryl is, right? Because if Daryl's on this random ship or whatever and then ends up over there, how is Carol going to find out specifically that Daryl's in France, right? It makes no sense. There would have to be something much bigger where there's more connections and there's, you know what I mean? So let me know what you guys think. Do you think Jadis is responsible for why Daryl is in France? A better question, I guess, would be, do you think the Pacific Republic is responsible for why Daryl's in France? You know, this is something that we've talked about a long time ago. This is honestly not necessarily, I mean, now I'm talking about things more specifically because we actually have scenes, but when they first announced the Daryl show, and first of all, when they first announced it being in France, that was what we all talked about right away. It was like, how does he end up in France? Well, the CRM has to be connected, right? I mean, now that we're literally days away from this show's premiere, I think it's kind of important to talk about again. Like, is that something that is possible now? Like, now that we've seen some footage, do you think it's still possible? And do you think Jadis is the one who actually was responsible for why Daryl ended up in France? I think that it does make a lot of sense. I don't think we're going to get scenes in the Daryl Dixon show of Jadis. Like, I don't think we're going to get that, but I think it makes sense that Jadis, you know, if the military or the Pacific Republic military was involved in this ship explosion, stuff like that, I think it makes a lot of sense that Jadis would be involved, right? Like, I think it just makes sense because Daryl is there, and I think that you can easily make a lot of these connections here, and I think it would be really smart to do so. I think that's what you want to do, right? Like, I think that's something that you want to do in this world. So you got to start connecting this stuff, and I do think that this is a way that they could start to do it here. So anyways, let me know all your thoughts down below. Remember, tomorrow there is going to be some early reviews out. Tomorrow there is going to be some early reviews out for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, and I'm going to cover a lot of them. Like, I don't know how many I'm going to handpick, but I'll maybe 5 to 10, maybe 3 or something like that. I've sort of done a lot over the years, but we're going to look overall at what people are saying about these episodes, and there might be some story details, so I definitely, you know, in terms of major spoilers, I'm going to steer clear of that. But if there's other things that hint at certain things, that I obviously will talk about it. So yeah, so make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like that. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.